Did you know that there's actually more than one God in the Bible? And not only is God just one of many gods, he's actually a savage war god. Christianity is a monotheistic religion, which means there is only one God. But the problem is that there are many gods in the Bible, and verses show that the so-called one true God is just one of many gods, and this completely destroys the position of mainstream Christianity and the Abrahamic religions in general. You see, God isn't actually a God of peace and love at all. I bet you didn't know that he accepted a burnt virgin sacrifice and executed all the firstborn children of Egypt. Now, this all makes a lot more sense when you realize that he's just one of many gods and is actually a bloodthirsty war god that took over. I criticize mainstream religion because I used to be a Christian and have experienced firsthand the damage that it causes. I suffered from religious trauma syndrome, or RTS, and it's my goal to help others that might be in a similar situation. So I demonstrate how mainstream religious beliefs are incompatible with logic and reason, highlight absurdities and contradictions in the Bible, and show just how much evil and violence are perpetrated by the so-called God of the Bible. So if that interests you, help us wake up the world and subscribe now. We're exploring two of the central themes of Christianity, which is that there is only one God and that he's a God of peace and love. Well, we have the verses that smash those ideas to pieces and show that he's actually a bloodthirsty war god. During the creation of humans, Genesis 1:26 says, "Then God said, 'Let us make humans in our image, in our likeness.'" Well, that sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? Well, let's look at Genesis 3:22. It says, "God said, 'Look, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil.'" If there's only one God, why the talk of us and our? A mainstream Christianity would claim that these verses are talking about the Trinity, but the Trinity, it wasn't officially established until the Council of Nicaea hundreds of years later. So not only would this be extremely confusing for the people of the time it was written for, but this argument doesn't hold any water for the other Abrahamic religions that don't believe in the Trinity. So what's actually going on here? Well, it all becomes clear when we realize that early scripture was written when the Israelite religion was still polytheistic. In other words, they believed in many gods. It's important to note that one of the first names used for God is Elohim, and the word Elohim is a plural noun for gods or deities. Additionally, Elohim almost certainly has roots in the polytheistic Canaanite gods, the children of El. The Canaanites worshipped many gods, and the most notable for our discussion are El Elyon, the Most High God, Asherah, his wife, and Baal. In the Hebrew text, El Elyon, or El Shaddai, is the God worshipped in Genesis, the first book of the Bible. However, beginning in Exodus, he's replaced by Yahweh. Yahweh is a savage god of war, an extremely jealous God that demands that people worship him alone, and anyone who disobeys will have their children punished, as well as their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren, and, well, you get the idea. Remember the 10 Commandments? Well, the first of Yahweh's 10 commands is, "You shall have no other gods before me. I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me." That's right, the 10 Commandments were written by Yahweh, a war god. And punishing kids who did nothing wrong? Not very fair, is it? Well, savage war gods aren't exactly known for being fair, and this is where things start to get insane. So Yahweh declares war on all the gods of Egypt, clearly implying that these gods exist and he will defeat them. In Exodus, we even see Egyptian sorcerers perform a miracle by changing a staff into a serpent. Then Pharaoh also called for the wise men and the sorcerers, and they too, the soothsayer priests of Egypt, did the same with their secret arts. Each one threw down his staff, and it became a serpent. In Yahweh's declaration of war against Egypt and its gods, he sends 10 terrible plagues. And what's the grand finale? He causes the execution of all the firstborn children of Egypt. Exodus 11:5, all the firstborn sons will die in every family in Egypt, from the oldest son of Pharaoh who sits on his throne to the oldest son of his lowliest servant girl who grinds the flour. Even the firstborn of all the livestock will die. Now, does that sound like a God of peace and love to you? An all-loving, one true God? Remember, this is the God of the Abrahamic religions, including Christianity. But we're just getting started because it gets a lot worse. The Bible describes Yahweh as craving animal sacrifice. Then burn the whole ram on the altar. It's a burnt offering, a soothing aroma, an offering by fire to the Lord. He demands that his followers sacrifice 2 lambs per day. This is what you are to offer on the altar regularly each day. 2 lambs, 1 year old. Offer one in the morning and the other at twilight. But it's not just animal sacrifice, but human sacrifice as well. When Jephthah conquers the Ammonites, Yahweh accepts Jephthah's daughter as a burnt virgin sacrifice. Does this sound like a loving God? Clearly not. And not everyone fell for this. The Gnostics were actually a group of heretical Christians that thought the God of the Bible wasn't the true God at all, but an evil God born from chaos, the devil himself. Well, what does it sound like to you? What makes more sense? Does accepting animal sacrifice and a burnt virgin sacrifice sound like an all-loving God or like a satanic being? Tell me in the comments. Yahweh was clearly a being of war and destruction, and the Bible admits this. Psalm states, Yahweh is a man of war. Yahweh is his name. When the Israelites reached the promised land and no longer needed help in war, they began worshiping the gods Baal and Asherah. Now, if Yahweh is the one true God, doesn't that sound like a very strange thing to do? Why on earth would you worship some false gods instead of the one true God? Well, it all makes a lot more sense when you realize that Yahweh was just one of many gods, and Yahweh was a cruel, bloodthirsty war god, not a pleasant guy. So when they no longer needed help in war, they turned to the other gods, such as the goddess Asherah and the fertility god Baal. It's apparent that Yahweh, a war god, was originally one of many gods. And when we look at the Hebrew texts, we can see that it began in a polytheistic manner. Psalms reads, God stands in the assembly of the gods. He stands as judge among the judges. So it evolved to get its believers to abandon their gods and pledge their allegiance to Yahweh. It began in a polytheistic way and evolved to convince believers that Yahweh was the most powerful of the gods. Then eventually, it phased out the other gods altogether and became monotheistic. Originally, Yahweh was worshipped along with many of the other Canaanite deities such as El Elyon, Asherah, and Baal. But as the religion evolved throughout the years, El Elyon, the Most High God we see referenced in Genesis, was merged with Yahweh, making them one, while the worship of the other gods was condemned. So Yahweh was promoted to the one true God, and eventually the very existence of foreign gods was denied, and Yahweh was declared the grand creator of the universe. We finally see this transition of a belief in many gods to a belief in one God in Isaiah, a later book in the Bible. This is what Yahweh says, I am the first and the last. There is no Elohim except me. I am Yahweh, and there is no other. There is no other God besides me. From the east to the west, people will know that there is no God except me. I am Yahweh, and there is no other. The Bible has since been translated to reflect this belief, as though it had been monotheistic the whole time, merging El Elyon and Yahweh into one. The Bible is not the work of a perfect, inerrant, all-loving God. The Bible represents man-made beliefs that began with many gods, then eventually proclaimed the supremacy of Yahweh, and then dismissed with the other gods entirely. In the New Testament, Christ comes on the scene and he's declared to be the Son of God. This is a man-made religion that reflected the mindset of the times it was written in, and it's been changed, altered, translated, and retranslated many times. It was originally for people that were polytheistic. So it evolved to convince polytheists to become henotheists, and finally to become monotheists. Now, why should you care about any of this? Well, when the Bible is taken as just a story or a metaphor, with its hateful passages removed, I have no problem with it. But when it's taught to many children as though it were absolute truth, that's when I get angry, and so should you. It contains many horrific teachings of homophobia, sexism, hate, and violence. It's mentally abusive and causes religious trauma syndrome, RTS, which shares the symptoms of PTSD, and no child should have to go through that. The Bible is founded on the belief in a war god, so is it any wonder that so many wars have been fought in its name? Enough is enough. Yahweh, the war god, is a fiction. He doesn't exist. But it doesn't matter, because the idea of Yahweh exists, and he's still causing war and destruction throughout the world, and children are still suffering and being mentally abused through its damaging teachings. So help us build a new world that's founded on logic and reason, so we can finally be free of dangerous beliefs. Check out my story with religious trauma syndrome, or my video on Is God Actually the Devil? Like and share this video and subscribe to help us spread this information. And a big shout out to all my supporters on Patreon. If you enjoy my work, consider supporting on Patreon and get access to our weekly secret live streams. My name is Morgue, and I am Hyperion, ad astra, to the stars.